And welcome back to the Pediatric Speech Sister Show. I am so thankful to have our guest on today, Sherilyn Morse. She is a speech language pathologist, and I am just so excited to bring her on as part of the Religion and Spirituality series. She's going to be teaching us a bit about Judaism. And so Sherilyn was very gracious enough to correct me because at first, I think it might even still be on the promo, I said, learning about Jewish cultures. And so she's going to teach us a lot about Jewish culture, but I would like to just know more from you, just correct terminology, because I'll just be completely honest with you, Sherilyn. I'm not Jewish personally, and I've had Jewish friends, but not. I haven't learned from them at all when it comes to the faith and the culture. And so I'm very excited because we do, as you know, as speech language pathologists, as healthcare providers, as educators, we meet Jewish families, but yet, and especially in speech pathology, when it comes to diets and everything that we need to be considering, I don't think that we consider it as much. So I'm very excited to learn from you. If it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and read your bio.
Sure. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay. So Sherilyn is a speech language pathologist working across the lifespan and recently started the Communication Cottage, a new neurodiversity affirming speech therapy practice that sees clients across the lifespan. Sherilyn is a clinician with ADHD who uses her life experience to support clients to create toolboxes to help them be their genuine selves. Sherilyn is a proud Jewish woman committed to culturally responsive practice and advocacy for clients and care partners. So, is there anything that I missed that you wanted to add on your
No,
bio?
I think that's everything.
Sweet. So, can you tell us actually a little bit about what got you started in speech and why did you decide to stay?
Yeah, sure. I think I was really into acting. Actually, that was very much what I was into in high school. And my parents were like, you can't be an actor. You gotta, they wanted me to do something that they felt was, I guess, a little bit more conservative of a, you can do this, you go to college, you get a job, you're good. Um, but I still act, so that didn't work. And then
That's awesome.
but my mom was like, "You should look into speech pathology," and of course, because my mom suggested it, I was like, "No." And then I did end up looking into it, and I was like, "Oh, this actually like fits exactly what I'm interested in. I love science, but I wasn't super into like I didn't want to be a doctor. I love like the patient care aspect." So I was like, "Okay," and I started looking into it. I think, and I started in COVID, so that was a really
Wow.
time to start being a speech pathologist, and I started actually working in a nursing home during COVID, which was very very stressful, and it was a really difficult setting I think in general that I was in, but I stayed. I've switched to a different bunch of different settings, which I think kind of gives me a cool background in that I've had experience across the continuum of care. And I've stayed because I absolutely love it. I love learning, and being a speech pathologist affords me the opportunities to continue to grow as a person, as a clinician, and I work across the lifespan because I get bored easily, and I see things. I'm like, oh, this would be so good for my pediatric clients, and I'm like, oh, this would be so good for my adult clients, and I never get bored with either side of things. So I think I'll just keep working across the lifespan, hopefully for my career.
That's amazing. I'm very curious to know how do you, I guess, straddle being an actor and also being a speech pathologist?
I take breaks.
Yeah.
So I was in a show not too long ago, in October, I guess, called Wait Until Dark. It was a really cool experience. I was actually in it with my significant other too, because he also acts. So
Oh,
he keeps me grounded towards the acting side. He's also a real estate agent. So like we both jump in between like our professional careers, what we really enjoy doing as well, just for fun, you know. He's pursuing acting more as a career as well, whereas I'm like, I just want it to be a fun way to get away.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
it actually falls very in line with what I do. A lot of my background is in acting. I use for like my voice therapy with clients, like knowing what it feels like to perform, knowing how important it is to take care of your voice, helps me to connect to my voice clients who are professional voice users. So I think it goes together well, but the hours make it difficult. If I get home really late, it's shooting right over to rehearsals. So I don't participate in as many productions and acting things as I used to before I was a speech pathologist. But I think as I kind of continue and my hours change and things like that, I'm gonna get to try out new acting opportunities. So it's we're just figuring it out right now, I think.
Well, please do. Honestly, I would love to see some of the productions that you're in. I think that that's really neat and fascinating. Um, so I do want to get into the nitty gritty and the meat of our discussion. So first of all, if you could just tell us about your experience as a Jewish woman, just your Jewish background across the lifespan and where you are now.
Sure. So I kind of bookmarked a couple stories in my head and wrote them out, and I don't know which ones are coming out of my mouth, but I love being Jewish. It's a huge part of my identity. It's one of, I guess, I'm in a relationship with someone who he grew up Catholic, so he's not Jewish. So being in an interfaith relationship forced me to kind of like look inside and think about how I relate to my Judaism, what it means to me, and be able to share that with other people. And when I described it to him, early on, I kind of said, he was like, well, for me, like religion's like a piece of my pizza. And I was like, for me, it's like the whole pie. And
Mm,
it's the whole, it's everything, and everything out, the cheese, the tomato sauce, all that's layered on top of it. But like my Judaism isn't just a slice, and it's never going to just be a slice. It's the whole pie. So that's how I see
hmm
my Jewish identity. I think that growing up, I had fantastic experiences being Jewish. I come from a family where a lot of people have intermarried. We have different races in my family, different religions in my family. So it's allowed me to see how other people relate to Judaism, and just think about it myself, I guess. Because my family's been really supportive about being Jewish, but also, being open to other traditions and things like that. That definitely plays a role. My grandma used to host all of the Jewish holidays at her house. And we would actually, she would host them at her apartment, and we would all like squish into this little apartment, and she would serve so much food. She would cook like 1,000 different options for everybody. And like that's what it's all about, I think. Like just being together and connecting with traditions. So I loved that side of things. I used to stay over my grandma's house on Shabbat, and she would like wake up in the morning, say her prayers. She would read from like the Chumash, which is like has the weekly portion that corresponds with like the Torah and stuff. And she would read like every single word. And then she'd read the footnotes of every single word. And like just seeing her dedication to it, like she became more religious later on in life.
mm.
It just gave me such a profound respect for where I came from. And then on like the not so fun side of things, though, growing up as like a Jewish person who, yeah, so many things to love about being Jewish, the values that it's provided me. Um, you can get values from so many places, but I feel like a lot of my core values are to do with Judaism.
Mhm.
The anti-Semitism also has been something that I've experienced throughout my entire life too. So like I was, whenever I think of like the first time I experienced anti-Semitism, I also preface it with like I was going to Hebrew school. We learned so much about Jewish values of charity and giving to others and self, like just that overwhelming selflessness, I guess. And I went to a window store with my dad. I must have been like 9 years old, I think. And I was like, oh, I don't want to, I was like running an errand with him. I was like super bored. And I remember that the man who worked at the window store had some sort of, I don't know if it was like an intellectual disability or just something, but I remember thinking like, wow, my dad's being like really patient with this man he just had trouble communicating, maybe, like I forget what it was.
Mhm.
Um he was definitely like oversharing, and I respect my dad so much for giving him grace and listening to him. And oh my gosh, how much has that like continued on with me as a speech pathologist, that like we give people space to share their stories. And I remember the man was sharing a story, and he was complaining about one of his jobs that he worked, and he was describing his boss, who he really didn't like.
Mm.
He referred to him as, one of those cheap Jews. And
Okay.
I was like so confused.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about? I was like, cheap Jews. I'm like, does he know we're supposed to give charity daily? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was like just so confused where that came from. And like my dad ended the conversation politely. Probably way more politely than I would have ended the conversation now, but ended it politely. We got into the car, and like it must have been the longest car ride of my dad's life. You know what I mean? Just the most
Mm.
uncomfortable, like, and I just asked him, I was like, what did he mean? And like that's when my dad told me what anti-Semitism was, that there's people who think Jews are cheap, and I think from then on, that's kind of where I was like, oh, there's people who don't like us. Like I had
Mm-hmm.
understanding of that before that. And I think it kind of opened my eyes that, yeah, like we're just sitting here trying to do our thing. And unfortunately, people sometimes have a problem with that. So it's been a mixed experience, is the only way I guess I can describe it.
I'm, so happy that you shared that story because that brings me actually to my next question. What are common misconceptions about Jewish people that also probably manifest as micro and macroaggressions? And how would you debunk those myths? So even just like what you said, that was a myth debunked of what was it that that guy said at the store that day?
I think he said that his boss was like a cheap Jew. And
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
so
So how would you debunk those myths?
So I think what's so dangerous about anti-Semitism and any hatred, or any microaggression is like oftentimes it comes from some sort of um, belief, or there's some sort of truth that is not, so there's no truth that Jews are cheap, but Jews in the past were forced to have jobs that involved money. Like, so, in ancient times, maybe they were forced to be money lenders. Who wants to lend people money? Like, no one wants that job, but that was the job given to Jews. So, like, Jews have always been around money because of anti Semitism, because of laws against us. So that's kind of where some of these microaggressions come from. So understanding that, I think, makes it all the more like when someone says something like that. And it wasn't just that time. People often are very outspoken about Jewish people, or use these microaggressions when they don't know a Jewish person's around. I there's there's stereotypes around how Jewish people look, whereas like not all Jewish people are white. Not all Jewish people have dark hair, and so, when you think of like the signs that came out in the Holocaust of like the stereotypical Jew, a lot of times it's still what people think when they think Jews. Whereas like there are people of all colors who are Jewish. Um, so that can be something that's difficult too, thinking like Jews look like me, and like
Mhm.
I'm a Jew, but this is just how I look, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I think that comes up a lot. It's also made me privy to a lot of like microaggressions, macroaggressions, because people don't know that I'm Jewish until I tell them.
Mm.
I think that's
Okay.
something that my dad has shared with me. Like he shared that, no one knew that my dad was Jewish until he shared it. Even last names sometimes are associated, certain last names are associated with Jews. Like Goldstein, Goldberg, like some of these Bergsteins. My name from my family, it used to be, it was Moskovitz initially, and then they changed it when they came over to Moscow. And then in the 50s, no one wanted the name Moscow because of the Red Scare. So like even my name Morse, like that is a product of anti-Semitism, of just like generational trauma. Like we couldn't even keep our name, because of from where we came from. We were persecuted there, then we were persecuted
Mhm.
here for having the name. So it's just, um, I forgot the question already. That there's the
No,
ADHD.
no, honestly, well, the
But
question was micro and macroaggressions, but I'm thinking about my friend, and she's Jewish, and I remember she told me, she said, my family sent me to school and told me she went to a private school. She was like, they sent me to school and told me not to tell anyone I was Jewish. She was like, so of course I told everybody. I was Jewish. And that's like her favorite story to tell. But I mean, it's interesting, that there's still that intergenerational trauma of not wanting to share who you are and your true identity.
yeah, and I think like I've taken what my dad said, where like my dad said in his job, he didn't tell people that he was Jewish until like he trusted them, and like my grandpa the same. My grandpa was a firefighter. There was people who were anti-Semitic, I guess, on the fire department force or whatever. I guess sometimes they didn't know that he was Jewish unless he told them. So like now, even now, like the people I work with, they all know that I'm Jewish, but like um it's definitely something that I consider, I guess, privileged information. I'm sometimes nervous to bring it up to clients. I don't know how they're going to respond. In general, like I live in an area that's very like supportive of different cultures and religions and stuff, so that's helpful because I work in an area that is open-minded. um but there's definitely been times where like I was wearing a Jewish star and I felt like, oh, I gotta kind of, I caught myself actually doing it. I wore this to work this week, and I caught myself in the bath. I was looking in the bathroom, I was about to leave, and I automatically went like this.
Mhm.
Like just taking a second, I was just like, damn. Like
Mhm, yeah, honestly.
I'm like, my people have been through so much, and I'm like hiding like a necklace that has the Shema, which is like the prayer that, this is, Hero Yisrael, like this is our core belief in God. Like I was like, why am I tucking this in? Like it was just such a me looking back at myself, just like, we're not doing this. Like,
Yeah, right,
yeah.
right.
So it's tough, I think. The macroaggressions of like being in middle school. I grew up in a super diverse area, and like that was fantastic for me. But also it was so wild that like an area could be so diverse and still like super close-minded, because I had pennies thrown at me. I had people calling out Heil Hitler in the hallways. Like I wish I was making this up, but like someone once was going through the halls. They're like, it smells like Auschwitz up in here because it's kind of
Oh, wow.
like just horrible triggering things. And
Mhm.
I had someone once tell me I was going to hell because I was Jewish.
That
Um,
is really strange.
it was wild. The Jews killed Jesus. Like there's just so
Mm.
I've had it thrown at me when um and just things that I've heard, someone using the term Jew me down. Oh, I had to Jew him down.
Yep, it's
I actually heard that in college one time, and I like peeped out from behind the wall because they didn't know I was there. And I was like, what's that mean?
Uh-huh.
Interesting thing to say. Where'd you get that from? And they were so embarrassed, and I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes, those things I think they're difficult, and I think that those are the things that like come up a lot, and I've heard a lot of other Jewish people who've also experienced similar things, but everyone's experience is different with it.
Wow. And honestly, thank you for just educating us on it, because it's if you're not Jewish, there are those things. I mean, I've definitely heard the how to do them. I hear that often.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's unfortunate that it's normalized a bit. But yeah, the macroaggressions, the violence that you experience, I'm so sorry. And I hate that that's happening still to this day for other Jewish people. So I do have a question, and this is definitely going to sound very ignorant. I know I sent this to you, and I'm like, I said for those who don't know, and I'm like, honestly, I am those who don't know. But
That's
the question is, if you could describe Jewish as ancestry and Jewish as the religion.
And I don't think it's an ignorant question at all, because like
Okay, okay.
I don't know that like every Jew knows about this, or and I might totally butcher this as well, but like the way that I see it's an ethno religion. So you can be ethnically Jewish, but you might not even practice Judaism. But like
Mm,
the idea of Judaism that we're a tribe. So, and I people refer to themselves like colloquially like, oh, you're a member of the tribe. And like it's always taken as kind of like a joke, like, ah, he's a member of the tribe. But like I feel like we should be embracing this like tribal, because it describes so much of like who we are and how we connect to one another. So there is like that's the ethnic Jewish part, right? And when I think of like being ethnically Jewish, like there's also different cultures within that. So like I'm Ashkenazi. My family is, from like from Europe, Russia, just kind of, I'm just like a blend of places. But like there's Sephardic Jews, there's Mizrahi Jews, there's other Jews as well that I'm, that I there's Mountain Jews. So and everyone has very rich traditions which within that. And sometimes people are like a blend, like my friend, his he is Sephardic on one side, he's Ashkenazi on the other side. These traditions come out in like, when we get married, after you get married, the traditions that you pass on. But like someone who's Ashkenazi Jewish and is like eating matzo ball soup and some of like these, I'm on the East Coast, there's like a lot of Ashkenazi Jews, and I'm in New Jersey, so like my area of New Jersey has a lot of Ashkenazi Jews too. But like then you go somewhere else and like all the Jews are Sephardic, they've got totally different traditions. There's jokes that like, oh, Sephardic people love spicy food, Ashkenazi people don't know how to season their food. So like even between Jews there's like fun cultural jokes that happen. And then in terms of the religion, there's Jewish people who don't identify with the religion. There's Jewish people who are very observant. And you could ask a question, and I'm in a lot of like Jewish question groups. Questioning is such a core identity trait for Jews. It's very encouraged to ask questions, to question everything. Don't just like take things blindly when it's taught right, and I think you could ask one question and there'll be like 1,000 opinions. So like on frame of reference, it depends, is it a Reform Jew? Is it a conservative Jew, an Orthodox Jew, a Reconstructionist Jew? So like it just depends. And then also, even if you don't identify with one of those, it's so personal.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you. And, I'm just thinking, I'm like, whoever is listening to this will definitely need to go and do your research. Yes, on the diversity within Judaism. So let's kind of move into the SLP medical side. What would you say are the top considerations as speech pathologists, as healthcare providers when treating patients from the Judaism?
One thing I'd like to talk about is like keeping kosher. So, and not every Jewish person keeps kosher, and the way that they keep kosher, like some of these things are very, very personal, and it can change throughout a person's life. It's tough, especially if you haven't done it your whole life. It can be really tough. But Jews may keep kosher. They may have a rabbi who they go to for things to consult for big decisions. They may have a rabbi who they go to for small decisions. So like it's very personal. They may never talk to a rabbi at all. Like it just depends. So when it comes to like keeping kosher, if you're doing modified barium swallow studies or you're doing a clinical swallow evaluation, feeding therapy, you might set up your station, have everything out. But like if your client keeps kosher, like the cookies, you're going to want to keep them wrapped so that they can check the label for themselves. Even clients who keep kosher, people keep it at different levels. It's like very person specific. It's specific to different communities. Like I would never assume that I understand another person's level of kosher. I would just ask them. So that's something that I think to keep in mind. It's not just like not eating pork, not eating shellfish. There's other things too. And then in terms of like consulting a rabbi, so like end of life care, like unfortunately my grandma recently passed away and she'd been sick in the past, and we'd had to have like end of life type discussions. And like I really had to, like, hey, we need a rabbi to like talk to us. Like this isn't like a family decision. This is like there's a lot of factors here. So people automatically like say like, oh, you're not allowed to do this if you're Jewish, or oh, you need to look at their their end of life plan because they're Jewish. You really just need to like involve a rabbi if that's what the family wants. Judaism, I think, is like very understanding of a lot of things. There's a lot of Jewish people in the medical field. There's a lot of Jewish people in all fields. We're everywhere. So, but like, so that's another consideration is like, this is a Jewish person, maybe asking them, would you like to bring a rabbi into this discussion? Or is that something that you don't feel is needed, especially when it comes to like food, feeding tubes, things like that. Holidays are big too. I always hear like, oh, Hanukkah's the Jewish Christmas, right? And it's like, that's like, oh, like, that's a bit of a microaggression because like identifying Jews through Christianity is like, oh, like Christians, Jews, like there's a long history there of and like I went to a Catholic university. I had a fantastic experience there. But there is a long history of like difficulties between Jews and Catholics, Christians, So like saying something like that is like, like, oh, you don't get it. And Hanukkah is like a relatively minor holiday, but it's like super celebrated. It's really fun. But there's major holidays that are a huge part of Jewish life, like Passover, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Purim. Not for every Jew, but for some Jews. And like, those are actually religiously more important. But like, nobody knows what a lot of those are. So I think like, yeah, like kind of looking up some of these holidays, like seeing what they're about and like what people do during those holidays, how you can support them. Also speech generating devices. So if you have like someone who observes Shabbat, they don't have to be Orthodox. Just if they do observe Shabbat, they may or may not be able to use certain device features. So, like if it's an electronic device, that's something maybe you want to discuss, have the family discuss with their rabbi, or give them low-tech options for when they're observing the Shabbat. Those are some considerations. There's many others, but like those are just.
And what is the Shabbat?
Yeah, so Shabbat is Friday to Saturday.
Okay.
Sundown on Friday it's the Sabbath basically. I said the Shabbat, but it's it's Shabbat. Yeah, it's from like Friday night to Saturday, sundown to sundown. It's the Jewish day of rest. Some people don't observe it. Some people do observe it. They don't use technology. They don't do work. Like I personally, I don't keep it to the fullest extent, but like I try not to do anything for like my business on Shabbat. I don't work. Like I don't get paid to do things on Shabbat. Like these are boundaries that I've set in recent years, I guess, and I found a lot of benefit from them. In like I like candles on Friday night as much as I'm able to. It's something that connects me, I think, with my ancestors, myself, with God. But everybody does that differently. They may or may not even observe it. But for some people, it's super meaningful. And it totally could impact your client's relationship with, when they're available for appointments, that sort of thing. But and it happens every week. So like for people who are more observant, like the whole week centers around Shabbat. It's sort of like a circle. And Shabbat is like, at the end of Shabbat is like that new week, and then it ends, so it's very, the idea, I guess, is it's sort of like a circle.
So when you say circle, do you mean like a cycle because it's Friday, Saturday, and then okay.
Yeah, it's like a cycle. So like I feel like in Judaism, time is like very linear, but even like different times of the year have different I don't know the Jewish word for it, but like different vibes. Like
right, there we go.
Different vibes. Like September is Rosh Hashanah. Like that is like rebirth. You are like becoming this new you. Like who do you want to be? And like what are you taking from the past year? What are you keeping for the next year? What are some things that you did that you didn't like, that weren't bringing you towards God or bringing you towards the person you want to be? that's, that's one of the vibes.
I love that. I love that. No, I appreciate that. I do also recognize there's a law of seasons. And so there's just a certain season and there's a vibe, just like what you said, so to speak.
That- yeah.
So if anyone wants to know more about the Jewish culture, especially, I mean, you listed a lot of holidays, and I'm thinking specifically, we didn't really get into working with peds, but there are so many different ways that we can, right? I mean, honestly, if you have any off the top of your head, because I know
Yeah.
that you work with the pediatric population too.
Fun, like coming up with different Hanukkah events. Purim is like kids dress up and adults actually. We dress up in costumes because like the main character in the story, who's like a very strong female heroine, she was like in disguise as a Jew, and then she presented herself as a Jew and she saved the Jewish people. Um, or helped save the Jewish people. So like kids dress up, adults dress up. It's like a very fun holiday. You give baskets to each other. So like if you find out it's Purim and you know that there's a family that celebrates it, what are you being for Purim? That's like a great conversation topic. Or, Rosh Hashanah, like, oh, how are you celebrating with your family? Even people who are not religious often celebrate Rosh Hashanah or Passover. Like, these are holidays that bring families together. So like asking what people are doing for those special occasions, I think can make them feel more connected to you as a clinician and make them feel like they're part of the conversation. And just being aware of like, we live in a society where there are a lot of people who are Christian, but like not everyone celebrates Easter. Jews do not celebrate Easter unless they're from an interfaith home that celebrates Easter. So like I guess just keeping that stuff in mind. But those are some holidays that people could start with and look into that, it could be fun for people, pediatric or adult. I'm sure a lot of adults want to share about their experiences with the holidays too.
How would you recommend that we go and do some more research so that way we can start implementing it into our treatment?
Yeah, good question. There's I don't have the name right now, but now I'm gonna have to post on my social media when I figure it out. There's definitely like Jewish on like TPT. There's if you type in like Sukkot, for example, which is like when we build these like outside little shelter things and you eat dinner. Some people sleep under the stars. It's like about you connecting with nature and God. That's called Sukkot, Sukkot. Like if you type that in on TPT, Sukkot SLP activity, like things will come up. So I think it's helpful to like give attention to Jewish creators, and really just, I mean, there's so many. If you look up any of these holidays, most of the sources are probably going to be Jewish. Like 18 Doors is a great organization for people who want to know more about like interfaith. Chabad is like more of like an Orthodox centered movement, but they're very inclusive towards everyone. And they have like great, really like deep information about Judaism, and they post a ton of resources. So a lot of the resources I get are from them. But just understanding that like different levels of Judaism, everyone's going to have an opinion, and one person's perspective of Judaism might be totally different than another. So it's hard, but talk to Jewish people, and I'd say that's always a good way to sift through things as well.
There we go. Yeah, just go straight to the source. Well, thank you so much, Sherilyn. One question I always like to ask my guests before we head out is what changes would you like to see?
I think just like learning more about anti-Semitism, how the increase that we've been seeing recently, how it plays a role in daily communication, how it impacts our clients, how it impacts our communication with friends, family members who are Jewish. I would just love to see people raise Jewish voices a bit when they're discussing Jewish topics. Um, Sometimes I don't see that, which is like unfortunate. But I always like when I do because I feel like most Jewish people I know are very eager to educate and to teach. And it's such a core part of being Jewish, wanting to like spread knowledge and being really excited about being Jewish, about like we're still here. There's been so many things against us, and like we're still here, so we want to talk about it. So I think supporting Jewish people comes from listening to Jewish voices And also, when you encounter anti Semitism, even when it's a microaggression, it would be great for people to speak up. I always hear Jewish voices speaking up for other Jewish voices, but like when I hear a non Jewish person speak up for Jewish people, that's what sticks out to me is like, wow, I feel so heard.
And thank you so much because, I'm just thinking about how those sayings are just unfortunately in our society. And so it is up to us if we want to be true advocates and truly serve multicultural populations, we need to speak up about it. So thank you so much for just being completely transparent and vulnerable today. Where can people find you if they want to know more about you, more about your business, and definitely more about the Jewish faith?
Yeah, good questions. So you can find me at the Communication Cottage. So on Instagram, it's at the Communication Cottage. On Facebook, on the Communication Cottage LLC. I'm located in New Jersey. Um, you can always reach out to me. My email is smorse at the communicationcottagenj.com. So if people, they can DM me, reach out if you have more questions, and anything you want to chat, anybody wants to chat about anything that they heard here, anything they're curious about. Yeah, I often talk to students, not even just about Judaism, but like if people have questions about clinical fellowships and neurodiversity affirming practice, like these are questions that I love answering about. I often get on the phone with people and chat with them just about being an SLP and the road to that. So those are things that I'd love to continue to do and give back to people in our profession. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm like just so excited to be here, and it was so great to chat with you. And I just love everything about your page and all of the
Oh.
insight that you give. And yeah, I'm just so happy that we got to do this.
Sherilyn, no, really, thank you so much. I'm so happy that you're here. And I was thinking, I'm disappointed we didn't get to. I didn't even think about graduate students or people on their SLP journey who might have their own, I guess just difficulties in times like this with anti-Semitism. So, if you are an SLP to be or, healthcare to be educator watching this, please reach out to Sherilyn at the Communication Cottage to ask your questions. So, thank you so much, Sherilyn. And thank you so much, everybody coming on live and those watching the replay. We will see you next time.